Okay, in today's class, let's discuss about CVS and DVCS. For sure, CVS stands for Centralized Version Control System, and this DVCS stands for Distributed Version Control System. So, what is CVCS, and where is it used, and who uses it? And also, what is DVCS? Who uses it? Where is it used? So, coming to CVCS, as already discussed, it's Centralized Version Control System. But before discussing about centralized and distributed, what a version control is. But in fact, what is version? So let's say in a software company, I gave an update or I built an app, and after few changes or few modifications or few feedbacks, I just want to build something, and I gave another version. Let that be, let's say my first version is V1, and then after update, I gave V2 as my version. But due to some errors, there may be situations where I may have to revert back to V1. And how do I do that? without even having without having what I had in version 1, it's not even possible. Let's assume that I changed a lot of code in for version 2. In that case, it's not possible to manually revert. So what is that I do? Let's say I had many people in my team working, trying to collaborate on the same thing, and after we give an update, there were few errors, and we want to revert back everybody's work. How do we do that? Or I just want to check who made changes to that particular code. How do I do that? So these questions were answered by version control. In fact, it uses the file system was already there in Linux. And nevertheless, version control system was also authored by the same person who wrote the very world's first open source operating system, Linux Torvalds. Okay, so coming to CVCS, so what is centralized and what is distributed? As the terms include, or as the terms say, centralized is just storing in one particular location, but whereas distributed, it could be any place, at any time, at anywhere. So in centralized version control system, so it's like the best example could be Microsoft Team Foundation server. So what are its advantages? Let's say every time I was just collaborating with binary files or kind of text data or kind of graphical data. At this moment, if I had many people in my team, if I prefer to choose distributed version control system, what happens is every single time I have to pull all the data, and that's not feasible. In these cases, I could prefer using centralized version control system because I'll be pulling only few lines of code and full visibility. As everybody will be merging into main branch directly, so everybody knows what exactly is being worked on. They don't have to, like, there won't be any situations where developers forget in which branch they were. And coming to learning curve decreased. So what does it mean? So let's say in distributed version control system, we have lot more applications available. In these cases, everybody has to learn them differently. Though they were built on one single stack, but they works in a different way. We'll discuss that later. But in this case, but if people choose to use centralized version control system, in that way, they don't have to learn anything. They could directly hit the ground running. But like the way it had advantages, it too have the other side of coin, disadvantages. So what are they? So let's say the server I had got crashed, or it got some faults and it got failed. So what happens then? The entire code was lost. Let's say at the same moment you don't have proper backup. So how do you get your versions? Possibly you're not going to get them. That was a delay. What happens in a version control is, let's say I'm a user A. Yeah. Let's say I'm a user A, and let's say there are somebody user B. If A is giving an update, then B has to wait. There is no chance like he'll be updating it simultaneously. He has to wait till A has done. And assuming that A's network was slow, in that case, the wait time would be too high. So these were few disadvantages for centralized version control system. So its counterpart, distributed version control system, solves these problems. So what's a distributed version control system? As already mentioned previous, in distributed version control system, copies could be anywhere. The same version copies could be anywhere. So let's say I had 10 people in my company or 10 people in my team, and we were working on a single repo. The very first thing we'll do is we'll just clone it. In that cloning, everybody has a copy, a local copy of the entire version control, of the entire versions that were built so far, all the commits that people gave. In this way, though the distributed server was lost, though the server in which we stored was lost, all of us 10 had the copies. So it won't be much difficult to start a new repo and push these. For sure, you might have heard this word Git and also GitHub. In the very beginning, it would be very confusing for you to know that, to assume that there are chances to assume that thinking Git and GitHub are same, but not the case. GitHub was built on Git, like the way Bitbucket, GitLabs were also built on Git. So Git is the main part, but how is Git working? Git is a part of distributed version control system, and it is also an open source. So let's say you have some fabulous idea, you could contribute to that. The entire source code was available on the internet. So what happens is, in Git, you'll be having one main branch, depending it could be main or master. What you could write, what people will be doing is they'll be just poking that repo, they'll just clone that, and either using Git in terminal or GitHub in CLI, Git in CLI or GitHub in GUI, they could just poke that, add all the files they require, and they give a pull request. And depending on the organization, they would even have some kind of merging criteria. And if the criteria was satisfied, they could just push that into main module, into main branch. Let's say for some reasons you want to revert back, so you could just do that in Git. In the next class, let's just discuss about how Git is working in the background and how GitHub is supporting it. How GitHub is being supported by Git